Hey guys, this is a quick video tutorial on how I set up my C++ development environment using Visual Studio Code for my editor and G++ for compiling and debugging. For those who are new to programming in general, and since we need a small program example anyways at the end to make sure that G++ is correctly installed, I'll show you a fun little algorithm to make a matrix-like effect using a for loop and the ren function from the standard library. Also, all of the websites and resources from this video will be down below in the description, so make sure to check that out. Alright, let's get started. Alright, so the first thing we need to do is install our code editor, Visual Studio Code. To do so, let's head to the website. Alright, you'll see here code editing redefined, download for Windows, stable build. Click that button. You get a little prompt, hit save file. And now we'll just wait for the download. Alright, once the download is complete, you can select it to start the installer. Select I accept the agreement. Click next. You can set a custom path if you want to. I'll just leave mine at default. Click next, click next. Here you can select to create a desktop icon if you want to. I'm going to leave that alone. Click install. I'll just wait for it to finish here. Alright, there we go. And you can leave this checkbox checked because we're about to launch it anyway. Click finish. And there we go, we have Visual Studio Code installed. You can get rid of the welcome page here. And there we go. Alright, now next we'll continue on to installing the C++ extensions for VS Code. That'll give us IntelliSense and a couple other features. Alright, so the next part is really simple. We're just going to install the C++ extensions for VS Code. To do that, just come over here to the extensions menu. Click search. Type in C++. And it should be the first one that comes up. And you're going to go to C++ IntelliSense Debugging and Code Browsing. Click Install. And then once it's installed, you just close out this little window, go back to Explorer, and you're good to go. Alright, and next up we're going to install MinGW-w64 from SourceForge. To do that, let's head to the internet, put in this link. It'll be down in the description, of course. It should auto-prompt you in about 5 seconds. We'll wait for that. And here we go, click Save File. Should be pretty much instantaneous download. You can go ahead and run the installer. Click Next. Make sure you change the architecture to x86-64. Click Next. I suggest leaving this path at default. If you want to change it, make sure you remember what you changed it to because it'll be important later when you go to set a path environment variable. Alright, click Next and let the download begin. Alright, once that's complete, let's close this window out here. You can click Next and finish the installation. Alright, next up we need to set up our environment variable. To do that, we need to get to the bin folder of our installation of MinGW. So to do that, I'm going to head into this PC. Sorry, I got a second screen over there you can't see. Head into the C drive, come to Program Files, come down here to MinGW, go into this folder, go into MinGW again, go to bin. Click up here and now you'll have your entire path to the bin folder, which we're going to need. Copy that. Come out. And there's two ways to get to the environmental variables. I'll just type in environmental variables like this and it'll bring you to this window. Another way that you can do that is you can right click this PC, come down to More, go to Properties, hit Advanced System Settings, and then it'll be here as well. And then click Environment Variables. And you want to make sure you're changing the user variables. Do not change your system variables. So come up here to Path, double click on Path, and add New, and then paste the variable, and paste the new path into this variable, and hit OK. And there we go, we've added it. So hit OK again. Hit OK one more time. And then close this out. And there you go, your environmental path variable is set. Alright, so now the important part is checking that our G++ compiler and debugger are installed correctly. To do that, we can check it out in command prompt or in a PowerShell inside of VS Code. To do it by command prompt, you just press the Windows key, type in cmd, press enter, type G++ space -- version, press enter. You should get a feedback like that. If that's not the output that you get, if it tells you that G++ is not a recognized command, then you have issues. Something's not right, something didn't get installed correctly. You need to go back to the earlier steps. I advise uninstalling everything and just redoing the earlier steps until you get this right. To check the debugger, you can do gdb space -- version, press enter, and you should get that kind of output. If both of these check out for you and they're good, then you're good to go and you're ready to move on to the next step. But I'll also show you how to do it in the PowerShell terminal inside of VS Code. You can just open up VS Code here. You can do this two ways. You can press Control-Shift-tilde key, or come up here to Terminal, select New Terminal, and you'll see it's a PowerShell. And right in here, you can do the exact same commands: G++ -- version. There you go, or gdb -- version. And there you go. So once both of those check out, you're ready to move on to the next step. So now that we know our G++ compiler and debugger are installed correctly and everything's working, we need to start creating our project folder in Visual Studio Code so that we can create that matrix program we were talking about. So there's a couple ways to do this. One way you could do it is using the Windows GUI. That's what people are used to. You can come into a folder here. You can do this folder anywhere on your computer. In my case, I'm going to put it in this PC Documents Programming, and I'm going to make a new folder here. This is just the traditional way you're used to seeing it done. I'm going to name it Matrix because it's going to be the Matrix program, and you don't have to go in it. Just as long as you have the folder, you can click File here in VS Code, go to Open Folder, and then select Matrix, select Folder. And when you do that, you'll notice it opens the Matrix folder in the Explorer pane. And this kind of acts as like a workstation for our project. We can make a new file. You can click that little button there, and then you can name it matrix.cpp, and that's a C++ file. And now we can type our code, so we could start coding. Now, I personally want to show how to do it the terminal way because I think it's important people learn how to use the terminal instead of just using the GUI method. So first, let's get rid of what we've already done. Let's delete this file, close the folder. We'll also delete this folder from the directory and get rid of that welcome. Alright, so to do it from terminal, you can use the terminal that's in Visual Studio Code if you like to, which is a PowerShell, as you can see here. And if you had the one up from the last part of the tutorial, you can actually kill it here to kill terminal and open a new one, or you can just add plus, and you can see you can add multiple terminals, and you get them all here in a drop down. But I personally am going to use an external terminal, and to do that you can press Control, Shift, and then C, and that'll launch your normal command prompt. Now I got a little custom one here with custom font, with custom colors anyway. But you can do it from here. You can create the entire project folder, even the file, for coding in right from here. So to do that, I'm going to show you a couple commands. To start off with, I personally use a secondary drive, a D drive, that I use to store loose files. And I'm going to go ahead and switch to that. You can do that by going D:. Now, of course, if you don't have this drive, it's not going to work for you. So, you put it wherever you're going to want to put it on your computer after you see these commands. I'm going to go ahead and change to my D drive, and then I'm going to type in dir. What dir does is allow you to view the directory, the current directory that you're sitting in. And as you can see, we're seeing a lot of folders here like documents, downloads, games, etc. And this is basically a folder view. It's the exact same as looking in your folder if you were sitting in the root of D and looking at the folders that are in the root of that drive. We can also clear the screen if we get too much jumbled up mess here. If we get tired of looking at it, you can type CLS, click enter, and you clear the screen. Now I already know where I want to go. inside of my D drive. So I'm going to go ahead and go straight there by entering a path. And the way you can do that is change directory, cd, space, and then your path. So I'm going to type documents. And the path, by the way, is relative in this case to the current place you're sitting. In this case, it's the root of D. So I'm going to press enter, and you can see now it's changed where I'm at. I'm at D documents programming. Next up, if you want to know how to go back, like let's say we want to go back up to documents, not program, we went too deep. You can type change directory space ... and then a backslash, and you press enter, it'll take you back up to documents. But let's go ahead and enter back into programming. Also, at any moment you want to do something more than once, or you need to recall a command, you can press the up arrow on your keyboard, and it will cycle through the previous commands that you did, so you don't have to type everything constantly if you were doing it, repetitively. The next thing now that we're back into the programming folder is we want to make that matrix folder that we made through the GUI before. To do that, we do mkdir, which is make directory, and then give it a name, matrix. And to see that we made that, you can type dir, and there it is. You can see the matrix folder right here. Next up, we'll go into the matrix folder, so cd matrix. Now you can see now that we're in the matrix folder, and then now we're going to type something a little different, code space period. Now what this does is actually launches VS Code at this folder. So basically it's going to put that folder in the Explorer pane, just like when we did open folder. So click that, and we can get rid of this one in the back. And you can see here now that matrix folder is open, and now we could continue from here, click new file, and start coding the way we did before and create that matrix CPP. But you can also do it right from the command line. We can type space null, because we want to make an empty file, nothing in it, then a greater than symbol, and then matrix.cpp, and that's going to create a file called matrix.cpp that's empty and has nothing in it, and you already see it up here in the Explorer window, but you can also see it by typing dir, and there it is, and our matrix folder is a matrix.cpp file. Now you can keep this up, the terminal up. I usually keep it on my second monitor, where I can review it and compile from the actual terminal, or you can close it out and work from straight within Visual Studio Code. And if we click this matrix.cpp file we just created, you'll see we're ready to code now. Alright, so now that our project's ready, we're ready to write the code for our matrix program so we can test G++ compiler out. Alright, so first up we need to add a preprocessor directive for IOStream. And we're going to do that to add the IOStream header so that we can do output to the screen. Next up, we're going to include the standard library for the RAN functionality, or RAN function later on. We're going to need that to create a random number generator, well, pseudo random number generation. Using directive for standard cout, and we're doing that so it's easier to type cout instead of having to do standard namespace : which is the scope resolution operator before every cout. And then we're going to add the main function, which we need in all our C++ programs, and then a for loop. We're just going to create a random integer here with 50,000 in it. Alright, so that should be good enough. That'll make it run long enough. And then we're going to put a condition of as long as I is greater than or equal to 0, and decrement each loop. And that way this will run 50,000 times essentially. And we're going to create a random number using the RAN function modulus 2. Now, if you don't know what the modulus operator does, let me explain it real fast. That %, basically what that's going to do is create a random number and then divide it by 2. And whatever the remainder is, not the division, the remainder, that's going to be what it returns. So random is going to be either equal to 0 or 1, because essentially what's going to happen is no matter what number random is, anything divided by 2 is going to be 0 or 1 when the remainder is considered. Because if it's 2, like if it's an even number divided by 2, it's going to be 0. If it's an odd number divided by 2, the remainder is going to be 1. So that's how you get your infinite zeros and ones at random. Then next up, we're going to add a cout, which is why notice I didn't have to type std : before it, and that's because I did the using directive up top. And we're going to actually output that random number each loop with a space, and then we're going to end the output. And then down here, once the loop breaks, we're going to turn 0, say that our program ended well, and then we're going to save it. Alright, so once that's done, we need to actually compile our program now and turn it into an executable so we can run it. To do that, we need to configure the default build task for VS Code using G++. So to do that, let's come up to Terminal and go to Configure Default Build Task. And then you're going to select from the list of options C++ G++.exe build active file. If you click that, you'll notice a VS Code folder gets put into your project folder, and then there's a task.json file with a bunch of basically different properties that you can change. You got your arguments here, which is basically your G++ arguments that you would put in, and the command line is just doing it automatically here, so you can set those up ahead of time, so every time it compiles it automatically does these commands. But basically with that done, you can exit this out because the file's been created now, and essentially we want to now run the compiler to actually build our project into an executable. You'll notice we still don't have an executable. To do that, you can do it two ways. Either you can go up to Terminal and click Run Build Task, or you can do Control-Shift-B like you see here. I'm just going to click it because I'm already here, and boom, it's done. And right there you see a matrix.exe. Now you can actually open another terminal here like this, and now you have a PowerShell yet again in that matrix folder. And you can delete this other one, by the way. That's just the compiler message here. You can delete it. Then you have this PowerShell here. You can now run your project from the PowerShell. So for instance, I'll do directory, and you can see the exe aside the CPP here. And you can do, from PowerShell you have to actually put period / before. You can't just type matrix.exe. You have to actually put period / matrix. And I think you can leave the exe off. Let me try. Yep, and there you go. You can see our matrix looking program running. So this is the silly little algorithm I was talking about, to get you a little matrix thing. If you're new to programming, it's kind of interesting. But there you go. So basically it prints 50,000 random zeros and ones, and all you need now is some font color changes and stuff like that, and you'll have yourself a matrix looking thing. Let's see if we can do it in our command prompt outside of that. We'll do it here. I'll full screen it. Let's do, and you can see it in here too, just the same, matrix.exe. Now in here you can just type matrix.exe and you'll see it run, and there we go. So basically that's all it does, but we're just testing out G++ here. Now the important thing is you can also compile even in this. Like, you don't have to compile inside of Visual Studio Code. If you want to, you can actually get rid of this executable. Also, I should show you how to delete in here too. Let's clear the screen, and you can see here a directory. You see that matrix.exe? We're going to get rid of it. You can type del for delete, and then matrix.exe, and that will delete the file. You see it removed from here too, and if we type dir, it's gone. Now say we wanted to compile from here, not inside of Visual Studio Code. You can do that too. Just type G++ space -o, and basically we're going to name our file here. We want to name it, let's say matrix, .exe, so we're just naming matrix. It's already going to be an executable, so you don't have to type that in. But now it needs to know what source file is it making an executable from. So you type space matrix.cpp, because that's the name of our CPP file. So, and then once you press enter, you notice you get a matrix.exe here. You type directory, and there it is. And then we could run it again, matrix.exe. And there it is. Pretty cool. So yeah, next up I'll show you how to debug using the GDB debugger for G++, and how to get that set up in Visual Studio Code. Alright, just as a quick aside, because I noticed I forgot to point something out in that last bit, you do not have to do the change default build task each time you want to build your program. You only have to do, once you've selected the default build task, all you have to do is press Ctrl-Shift-B inside of the program. So like for instance, if I wanted to get rid of this matrix executable and press Ctrl-Shift-B, it just rebuilds it right back, right? So, and if you change something about your code, like, I don't know, say you changed it by 3, like that, on the random number generation, and you rebuild it, Ctrl-Shift-B, it immediately replaces it with the other one, even though you didn't delete the first, because it just overwrites it. And if you run it again, like if I run it from this terminal, matrix.exe, and I'll just stop it. You can do Ctrl-C to stop the infinite loop, by the way, if you ever get one of those. And basically you'll see here 1 2 0 2 2 1 2 0 2 1. So obviously it's changed because of that 3 change. But I just wanted to show. Also in the terminal, it's not as annoying as you might think either to rebuild. Say for instance, I do G++ matrix space matrix.cpp, alright, to build. Alright, remember how I told you could press up arrow and go back? So you can easily just rebuild again. Build, build, build. You can build a whole lot that way really fast, so it's not like you have to type all that out in the terminal each time. It's really easy to do. But anyway. Alright, so the last part of our tutorial is we need to get the debugger set up for G++ inside of the Visual Studio Code. To do that, we're going to go to Run, Add Configuration, C++ GDB, G++.exe, Build and Debug Active File. This will begin compiling as well as debugging the file, or the executable. However, we don't have any breakpoints, so it's just going to run all the way through, and that's fine. Let's just let it finish. There it goes. Let's kill the terminals. There's actually 2 of them. The first was the output terminal. This terminal is the debug terminal. And then right here we have a new launch.json file. This has a lot of the configuration options for your debugger. Don't worry about most of them right now, but stop at entry is an important one. Since we don't have any breakpoints in our file, it's not going to stop anywhere. It's going to run to completion like you just saw. If we change this to true, it will stop at entry of main. This will give us a point to stop at and walk through the file and take a look at the file step by step as the program executes. So let's save that, and you can also check to see if you have autosave on here in file. But Control S to save. Hit X on the JSON file. It'll still be over here on the side if you ever need to get back to it. And then you can do F5 to debug the program, or go to Run, Start Debugging. And if you do that, it will begin debugging. Notice this time it stops right after main entry, right before the for loop. And if you come over here to Run, which is your screen where you can take a look at your local variables live, you'll see I here is equal to 0. And that's because this line hasn't run yet. If we press step into, I gets set to 50,000. The same with random. I'm not sure why it shows up as 16, but it's nothing right now. If I was to press step into, it's 1. So essentially, that tells you too that whatever random number was generated was a odd number, because modulus 2 is going to end up with a 1. So if we press step into again to go to the next line, it's going to output that to the screen because cout random with a space so that 1 is output to the screen, and it starts to loop over again. So if you continue this step into cycling through the loop, you can see the I dropping for the 50,000 iterations and the number that random is going to be, so we know the next one's going to be a 0, and there it goes to the screen. And this will continue 50,000 times very rapidly. So if we press this button continue, it will continue out the rest without any more breakpoints at all. Now, we didn't have any breakpoints in our file, we just used that that debugger argument to make it stop on the entry of man. But what if we wanted to use some of those breakpoints? Let's take a look at that. If we go back up to Explorer here, go to the launch.json and turn off stop at entry again. Now our file would just run completely through if we went to debug it. It would not stop at all. But if we come over here on these lines, you see this little red circle. If I set it to say here, this cout random and then space, this is where we output the number to the screen. Now it would breakpoint right before that line, so it's actually going to execute line 8 and then stop before 9, just like you saw with the yellow highlight before. So this int random will actually be assigned a number, a correct number that's actually its final number to print out to the screen. So let's take a look at that. Press F5. You can see it stopped here, and if we go to the run screen, right here we can see that random has a 1 in it, and we're on the first iteration. If we press step into, it outputs the 1 to the screen, and we continue normally looping around. You can press continue, 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 and each time you'll notice it stops at that breakpoint. You could remove the breakpoint and then continue, and it will continue out the program. Now the use of breakpoints, of course, is to debug a program, to find bugs. If you have a bug that's going on and you're trying to figure out what's causing it, it's a way to take a look at your code step by step to figure out what the issue may be. But anyway, yeah, so G++ compiler and debugger set up on Visual Studio Code. Have fun with it. Good coding times.